Good morning. We're continuing with our study of the Gospel of John. I'm Stephen Leake. I'm an elder with First Presbyterian Church of Mesquite, Texas, and I'm also the teacher of the Discipleship Sunday School class there. For our curriculum, we're using the Daily Bible Study Series, which is by Professor William Barclay. And the source of our scripture is from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, which is the Bible that we have in the pews at our church. Today we're continuing with the story of the adulterous woman, which is contained in the very last verse of chapter 7 and the first verses of chapter 8. Now, I'd like to point out that we're also in volume 2 of the Daily Bible Study Series now by Professor Barclay. Now, we started this passage last week and explained what happened. Today, we're going to go into further depth and explain what it means to us as Christians. So I'm going to reread the scripture that we started last week. John 7:53 through 8:11. Then each one of them went home, while Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and making her stand before all of them, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" They said this to test him so that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And once again he bent down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they all went away, one by one, beginning with the elders. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, sir." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on, do not sin again." Now, this passage shows us two things about the attitude of the scribes and the Pharisees. First, it shows their conception of authority. The scribes and the Pharisees were legal experts of the day, and problems were taken to them for decision. It's clear to them authority was characteristically critical, censorious, and condemnatory. That's a lot of alliteration, isn't it? That authority should be based on sympathy, that its aim should be to reclaim the sinner, never even entered their minds. They conceived of their function as giving them the right to stand over others like grim invigilators, to watch for every mistake and every deviation from the law, and to descend on them with unforgiving punishment. They never dreamed that it might lay upon them the obligation to help the sinner. There are those who regard a position of authority as giving them the right to condemn and the duty to punish. They think that such authority as they have has given them the right to be moral watchdogs trained to tear the sinner to pieces. But all true authority is founded on sympathy. When Methodist evangelist George Whitefield saw the criminal on the way to the gallows, he uttered the famous sentence, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." The first duty of authority is to understand the temptations which drove the sinner to sin and the circumstances in which sin became so attractive. No one can pass judgment on another unless some attempt has been made to understand what the other has come through. The second duty of authority is to seek to reclaim the wrongdoer. Any authority which is solely concerned with punishment is wrong. Any authority which, in its exercise, drives a wrongdoer either to despair or to resentment is a failure. The function of authority is not to banish sinners from all decent society, still less to wipe them out. It's to make them into good citizens. Those who are set in authority must be like physicians. Their one desire must be to heal. Second, this incident shows vividly and cruelly the attitudes of the scribes and the Pharisees toward the people. They were not looking at the woman as a person at all. They were looking at her only as a thing, an instrument whereby they could formulate a charge against Jesus. They were using her as a person might use a tool for their own purposes. To them, she had no name, no personality, no feelings. She was simply a pawn in the game whereby they sought to destroy Jesus. It is wrong to regard people as things. It's also always unchristian to regard people as cases. Dr. Paul Tournier, in A Doctor's Casebook, talks of what he calls the personalism of the Bible. He points out how fond the Bible is of names. God says to Moses, "I know you by name." There are whole pages of names in the Bible. Dr. Tournier insists that this is proof that the Bible thinks of people first, foremost, not as fractions of the mass or ideas or cases, but as persons. I'm reminded of that saying of Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, who was also a Presbyterian minister. He carried a little piece of paper in his wallet, and after he died, someone going through his wallet pulled it out and read what it said, and it said simply this: "There's no one you can't learn to love once you have heard their story." That's a beautiful sentiment, isn't it? It's extremely unlikely that the scribes and the Pharisees even knew this woman's name. To them, she was nothing but a case of shameless adultery that could be used as an instrument to suit their purposes. The minute that people become things, the spirit of Christianity is dead. God uses his authority to love us into goodness. To God, no person ever becomes a thing. This passage tells us a great deal about Jesus and his attitude to the sinner. First, it was a principle of Jesus that only those who are without fault have the right to express judgment on the fault of others. "Do not judge," said Jesus, "so that you may not be judged." Second, it was also a principle with Jesus that our first emotion towards anyone who has made a mistake should be pity. We must also extend to others the same compassionate pity we would wish to be extended to ourselves if we were involved in a similar situation. Third, it's very important that we should understand just how Jesus treated this woman. It's easy to draw the wrong lesson altogether and to assume that Jesus forgave lightly and easily, as if the sin did not matter. What he said was, "I am not going to condemn you now. Go and sin no more." Jesus' attitude toward the sinner involved the second chance. He did not say that what they had done did not matter, but he was sure that everyone has a future as well as a past. His attitude toward the sinner involved pity. The basic difference between Jesus and the scribes and the Pharisees was that they wished to condemn. He wished to forgive. They knew the thrill of exercising power to condemn. Jesus knew the thrill of exercising the power to forgive. Jesus' attitude toward the sinner involved challenge. Jesus confronted this woman with the challenge of a sinless life. He believed that with his help, sinners have it in them to become saints. His method was not to blast men and women with the knowledge that they were miserable sinners, but to inspire them with the discovery that they were potential saints. His attitude toward sinners also involved a warning. Here we are faced with the eternal choice. Jesus confronted the woman that day. This story is unfinished, for every life is unfinished until it stands before God. Now, Professor Barclay does not comment on this, but I would like to point out one aspect of this story that's contained in verse 9. When they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the eldest. In 1974, President Nixon was impeached. Now, I was 24 years old. I'd just been discharged from the Air Force, and I was attending college. And I followed the proceedings on television every day after school. When it looked as though he would not win trial by the Senate, Nixon resigned and Gerald Ford became president. The first act of President Ford was to pardon President Nixon. Well, that made me furious. I thought he should stand trial and be held accountable for his actions. My father was an attorney and a church elder, and he told me, "No, son, Mr. Nixon has gone through enough." He went on, "Mr. Nixon will always bear the shame of being the first president to resign for misconduct in office. That is punishment enough." I always think of my father's wisdom and compassion when I read this story. As the elder, he forgave, and I learned a very important lesson that day. Thank you for joining me today. God bless each and every one of you.